All right, lesson 51, imaginary numbers and Euler's notation for complex numbers. So, imaginary numbers. Anytime you see imaginary numbers, that's when we have any kind of negative number underneath the square root. So if you have a negative number under the square root using Euler's notation, it's equal to I. So the square root of negative 1 is equal to I. This is something you want to memorize. Okay? And over here, we can say, well, I know the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of a negative is I. So the square root of negative 4 is equal to 2I. And we have the square root of negative 9. So I think we're getting the hint here. So the square root of 9 is 3, and we have a negative under the house, so that's I. Okay, so represents imaginary numbers. So right here, we've got 12. We can simplify this. This is 4 times 3. What's the square root of 4? It's 2. The 3 stays inside the square root, just like normal. And what do we do with this negative sign? We pull out an I. When you guys take it out, I want it in front of the square root. So we have a 2I and then a square root of 3. For the square root of 13, this one does not simplify, but we can take the negative out, and that becomes an I square root of 13. Okay? So for this one, we have the square root of 3 times the square root of negative 2. So this negative comes out and is an I in the front. And then these can multiply together, and we have the square root of 6. It is not negative 6 because we took the I out, so it is a positive 6. All right. Don't worry about that. So imaginary numbers, we want to memorize a few things. So I, we're going to remember, is the square root of negative 1. So then what is I squared? Well, if I take the square root of negative 1, because that's I, and I square it, it undoes the square root. So I just get negative 1. Now I have I cubed. So what is I cubed? Well, I cubed is I, or the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. Oops. So these two, if I multiply them together, become negative 1, right? And this one stays the square root of negative 1. But what I want you to do is leave this as I. So this is really a negative I. And then we have I to the 4th power. So I to the 4th is the same thing as I squared times I squared. And one thing we want to do is remember I squared is negative 1. That's really important. So if I plug in a negative 1 and a negative 1, I to the 4th is positive 1. All right, now let's try I to the 5th. Well, I to the 5th is I to the 4th times I. What is I to the 4th? 1. So this is actually I. So we're starting over here with I. And so what happens is it actually iterates every single 4th number. So for example, if I said, what is I to the 17th power? Well, let's break it down into 4s. We have I to the 4th times I to the 4th times I to the 4th times I to the 4th. 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 16. So one more I, right? What is every single I to the 4th equal to? 1, positive 1. So 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times I. And we always leave I as itself. So I to the 17th is the same thing as just I, because it iterates every 4th power. So I to the 18th, if I asked you guys what that one is going to be the next one over. Now it's going to be I squared. Again, we could break it down by 4s. 2, 3, 4, and then we have I squared. So each of these are equal to what? 1. And I squared is equal to, because we memorized this, negative 1. So what is my answer? 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. All right. So let's add some complex numbers. This part's really easy. We're just going to combine like terms like you always do. So 4 minus 2 is 2. And then we add the I pieces together. So that's plus 9 I. I always want this written as a plus or minus bi, meaning the real part is here and the imaginary part is here, okay? So always the I goes second. All right, just like we normally do, we combine like terms. So I have 4 minus 3i. If I'm distributing a plus sign here, then it just stays the same. But right here, we have to distribute the negative sign. So this is minus 2 and plus 5i. So combine all the real pieces first. So I have 4 plus 6 is 10, and 10 minus 2 is 8. Okay, then combine the imaginary pieces. So this is negative 7i plus 5i is negative 2i. So again, the real part first and the imaginary part second. All right, simplify. So we've got 2 times I minus 7 times I times I plus 2i minus 4 minus the square root of 3. So 2i. This is the same thing as 2i squared minus 7i cubed plus 2i minus 4. Let's simplify this here. We have a minus, and because of the negative 1, we're going to pull out the I and make this a positive root 3. Okay, so what is I squared equal to that we're going to memorize? I squared is equal to negative 1. So let's replace I squared with negative 1. I cubed. I cubed is the same as I squared times I, and I squared is equal to negative 1, and we keep the I, so really it's equal to negative 1i. So instead of I cubed, we're going to write negative 1i plus 2i minus 4, rewrite the rest of that. So let's simplify further. I have negative 2. Here we're going to have plus 7i plus 2i minus 4 minus I root 3. Okay, so combine the real parts. The negative 2 and the negative 4 gives me negative 6. And combine the imaginary parts. Okay, here we have 9i and then minus root 3. So how we're going to write this is plus 9 minus root 3, and the I goes afterwards. That's a minus sign. Okay, so 9 minus the root 3, and then we put the I afterwards. So this is in the form of A plus BI. So the real part's negative 6, and the imaginary part is 9 minus root 3. Okay, let's try another one. All right, so we have 3. We do want to just memorize that I cubed is the same as negative I plus 5. We're going to memorize that I squared is the same as negative 1. Okay, we have 2i to the 5th. So a couple ways to separate this is by 4s or 2s. I squared is negative 1, I to the 4th is positive 1. So if you go by 4s, this is the same as I to the 4th times I to the 1st, and I to the 4th is the same thing as positive 1. So this whole thing simplifies to just I. Okay, so here I get negative 3i minus 5 plus 5i plus 7 plus 2i. So we're going to combine the real parts first. So negative 5 plus 7 is 2. Negative 3i plus 5i is 2i, plus another 2i here is 4i. Okay, so again, if you did not write this down, you definitely want to memorize this. Okay, we leave I always as I, even though we know it's equal to the square root of negative 1. You want to memorize I squared is negative 1, I cubed is negative I, and I to the 4th is 1. Everything after that iterates, okay? So you have to find it. You can count through by 4s, but you really need to know this little table here. Okay, let's see what's next. Oh, whiteboard problems. guys can try simplifying those. Make sure you get it right.